And I was standing on the skid of the helicopter, and I had to come off the helicopter backwards. Came off the helicopter, and I'm watching the helicopter get smaller, and it was the scariest thing by far I've ever done. And this time, at the Grand Canyon, so I bungee jumped out of the helicopter into the Grand Canyon just to make sure that it was safe for Will to do it. And he did it, and things went great.
Quinn Early played in the NFL for 12 years when the average was 3. He played wide receiver for the San Diego Chargers, New Orleans Saints, Buffalo Bills, and New York Jets. In 2012, he started his second career as a stuntman for Will Smith, Shemar Moore, and other greats. He is known for his work on Den of Thieves, The Nice Guys, and Olympus Has Fallen, to name a few. In this interview, he'll talk about training for the NFL, the locker room atmosphere, negative press, underrated players, playing injured, memorable moments, becoming a stuntman, jumping out of helicopters into the Grand Canyon, and more. So what drew you to football, and how did you become a professional?
Wow, it's such a long story. Where should I begin? When I was 8 years old, I told my mother that I was going to play in the NFL someday. And, at the time she was, "That's nice, dear." I just always had a desire to play. When I was a kid, I would post pictures of the college athletes on one of the walls in my bedroom, and then I would post professional athletes on the other wall. And before I would go to bed at night, I would visualize, and I would always say to myself, first I'm going to go here to college, then I'm going there to the NFL.
So how did you train for that? What was your training schedule in general?
Those are really good questions. So in college, it was really, really tough. It was super casual in high school. But when I got to Iowa, I learned really fast. It was all about being in the weight room, nutrition, running schedule. But then you also had to juggle being a student athlete. It was just very challenging, but I learned how to work out. And fortunately, I played for a great coach, Hayden Fry. He's in the College Coaching Hall of Fame. And then my offensive coordinator was a man named Bill Snyder. And he really taught me how to study, how to learn the game. I always use the analogy that when you're in college, what those coaches are doing is it's like they're building a race car, right? Me being the race car, putting the engine in and proper oil and all the things that it takes to be a race car. And then once you're built, when you get to the NFL, you're just a race car. You still have to continue to work hard, but they expect you to be that professional. And in the off season, when I was in the NFL, I would get up at 5 a.m. and I would do my track workouts, and then I would go to the gym and get my weightlifting in. Then I would come home and I would help my wife get my children ready for school, take them to school, and then I would go to the martial arts school. I also do Kung Fu and Tai Chi. I'd come home and I would take a nap and go get the kids from school, and then I'd spend the rest of the day with them. So that was my off season in the NFL. But when I did that, I was really prepared for when that season started, and it really helped me to have longevity.
When you were playing in the NFL, what was the morale like in the dressing rooms after a victory, for example, or after a loss?
The thing that I miss the most, and one of the best things about being a professional athlete, and especially in the NFL, is that locker room atmosphere and camaraderie that you have with your teammates, your brothers. It's one of the only professions where grown men can act like a bunch of little kids in the locker room. It's just the jokes and the laughter. But once they blow that whistle and the game starts, it's all business. The stresses of it is the fact that you have to play well every day, every game. There are always younger, more talented people coming in. So it's really stressful that way. As far as the wins and losses, in the NFL, when you're winning games, it's all fun. Everybody's laughing in the locker room. The coaches are happy. The owner's happy. Everybody's having a great time. It's a blast, right? Football's fun again. But when you lose, it is 180 degrees the other direction. People are quiet. People start getting cut, losing their jobs. It's just like a big corporation that's under a lot of stress. And if you don't get those numbers up, heads are going to roll type of thing, So that was really hard. So it's a lot of ebb and flow that way. But I really do miss it. And I know that we're going to get into talking about stunts in a little bit, but that's the one thing where both of those professions are alike, is the camaraderie. One thing I always tried to do was make sure that I always worked as hard as possible so that me as a player wouldn't get blamed for why we were losing, even though that didn't always work, right? Sometimes you just open the paper and just read about how horrible you are.
So how does it feel to read about yourself in the paper as a failure?
Jim Mora, Sr., who was my coach when I played New Orleans, he used to always say that football has a lot of peaks and valleys, right? And the important thing is to not let the valleys get too low. So in other words, when people are saying bad stuff about you or you lose, just keep it all in perspective. But then when something great happens, keep that in perspective also. Don't let it get too high. And what I also learned how to do was not really pick up the newspaper. There was times when I would read a quote in the newspaper from me that I never said. Things like that. And actually what I used to do was I used to use that as fuel to propel my rocket to success. It just made me go harder.
That's awesome that you were able to do that. So who is the most underrated player that you've played with or against?
There were a couple. Eric Allen, who used to play cornerback for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was about the best cornerback I ever played against. Another gentleman was a man named Sam Mills. They used to call him Field Mouse. Sam Mills played middle linebacker for the Saints, and he was about 5'9", 225 pounds. And if those guys usually are about 6'4", 6'5", and weigh like 275. So he was a little guy, but man, he played 4 times his size, and he actually went to Carolina Panthers. There's actually a statue of him outside their stadium. That's how good he was, but incredibly underrated. I think some would say that I was probably an underrated player, but I don't really concern myself with that because I feel very thankful to have been able to play for 12 years in that league when the average is 3.5.
Why is the average so short?
They say the statistic is 100% of NFL football players will get injured. And then also, too, what happens is once you play 3 seasons and 4 games, you get an NFL pension. So now they have to pay you the rest of your life. So I think some of the more middle-of-the-road players, they will never tell you this, but after that 3rd season, they'll just start getting rid of guys. So that's part of it as well. It's hard enough to make it into the NFL, but it's really hard to stay.
So do you ever go into a game not feeling your best? And what do you do when that happens?
Again, really good questions. If it is at all possible, you play. I've played with broken ribs. I've played with 103-degree temperature. My very first game, I was playing for the Chargers, and in warm-ups, I caught the ball wrong, broke my pinky finger. It was at like a 90-degree angle. They took me inside. They shot Novocaine and cortisone in my finger, put a glove on me, take my fingers back together, and told me to have a good game. I went out and I played, and that's pretty much it. You don't really want anybody else to come in and take your position because then they might play so well that now they're rethinking keeping you in there. So that's something I think most people don't understand, is that a guy will break some ribs or might have a separated shoulder or is just really injured, but they'll still be out there playing. And you better play as well injured as you did when you weren't injured, or else everybody starts talking about how bad you are now. So it's just it's a tough game.
What is the hardest part about it, do you think?
I just think it's the money and the politics makes it becomes not necessarily just about the game. It's all about winning. People get fired, people get cut, and it's just such a business. They'll get rid of you.
Wow. It's stressful just thinking about it. So what is the game that stands out most to you in your career?
When I first signed with the Buffalo Bills and we were playing the New England Patriots and we were about to lose the game, and we were down on our end of the field, and the quarterback was Jim Kelly was the quarterback at the time, and he threw me. I ran like a little quick slant, which you go down, you come in a little bit, and he threw me the ball, and I went like 80 yards for like the game-winning touchdown. It was kind of like my welcome to Buffalo, to that team, to that city, and so that was pretty memorable.
It's against Ricky Reynolds, number 21, lined up one-on-one. Just a quick 3-step drop. You got to run towards the upfield shoulder to give yourself a chance to bring down the man. And Early is too fast. You can't give him that running start.
Awesome. So then how did you go from football to being a stuntman?
You know, it's funny because most of the stunt people that I know, every one of their stories is just random. My football career was over. So I was sitting at home and one of my best friends from college called me and he was like, why don't you come be in my movie? He was a movie producer. So next thing I know, I was hanging out the back of a truck shooting a machine gun, and then they paid me for it. And I was like, are you serious? I can make money doing this? So I became friends with the stunt coordinator and I asked him, how do I I do this for real? And so he gave me the blueprint on what to do to be successful at being a stuntman. I think I did one movie that first year. I did one movie that second year, which was Olympus Has Fallen. So now, I work all the time. So I've been doing that for about 10 years and I absolutely love it.
So what is it like to be a stuntman? What do you love about it?
I love the camaraderie, just like in football, when you get around with the fellas and everybody's joking and you're just having a good time and you're having a blast. And like in football, once they yell action, you really have to perform. And then once they yell cut and that's over with, it's back to the jokes and having fun. Also, I love the fact that it's more of a blue collar job, right? So the actors get all the glory and the fame and the money, and the stunt people who make their action look really good, right? You just kind of do your job and you go home. Nobody really sees us guys, right? But it's fun. I love it. I love it. And I'll tell you what's great is, so my son is actually a stuntman too. His name is Cameron. We get to work together sometimes. Man, we have a blast when we're on set together.
Oh my God, that's so cool. So is it dangerous at all?
Yeah, there's always risks, and what I always say is no matter how small the stunt is, you always respect it and you always prepare. If I'm tripping over my shoelace and fall and that's the whole stunt, I'm going to respect that stunt, right? And make sure that I do it properly. So I always rehearse. And this is what I did in football too. I rehearse 100 times over in my head what it's going to look like. I visualize, right? I'll actually practice the stunt. And then that way, when it's time to film your scene, I've already been over it 150 times. I've had a couple of small injuries, but nothing too severe to this point.
So interesting that both of your careers have a huge history of injury. What is the most dangerous stunt that you've ever done?
So I don't know if you remember Will Smith. Someone challenged him to bungee jump out of a helicopter into the Grand Canyon for his 50th birthday. So guess who was the test dummy for that jump? It was me. So I got a call from the stunt coordinator and he said, "Hey, I know that you've doubled Will before. Would you be interested in testing this jump?" So I told him I would. When I got off the phone, I stared straight ahead for 2 minutes. What did I just agree to? I don't like heights. So this was an opportunity for me really to go and overcome my fear. The first time I did it, we were in Simi Valley, California to practice. We were 400 feet up in the air and it was a 200-foot drop out of the helicopter. So I had 3 bungees coming from my chest and I was standing on the skid of the helicopter and I had to come off the helicopter backwards. Came off the helicopter and I'm watching the helicopter get smaller. And it was the scariest thing by far I have ever done. And this time at the Grand Canyon, so I bungee jumped out of the helicopter into the Grand Canyon just to make sure that it was safe for Will to do it. And he did it and things went great. Very scary though. I wouldn't do it again, but, but yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So what's the hardest thing about stunt tumbling?
One of the harder things for me has been anytime I have to drive and maybe slide a car, because you have to be pretty precision at it. It's really hard when you have a really tough stunt that you have to do. Just the preparation and the getting ready for it and then mentally getting yourself prepared and then performing that stunt. And sometimes you have to do it 5 or 6 times.
What are some of the other harder stunts that you've done?
I worked on a show called The Leftovers, and there was a scene where the gentleman gets thrown through the window, and it was a 2-story house. It was one of those houses where you have to walk up the stairs to get to the front door. So when you look out the window, it was a pretty good drop. And they put a pad out there, right? And first, before they put the glass in, I just jumped out the empty window, and you do that a bunch of times. And then they put in what they call candy glass. So candy glass will break into small little pieces as opposed to shards like a real glass will do. And they yell action and out the window.
3, 2, 1, go!
So that was a hard one. I doubled Will on the movie Bright, and I was hanging upside down by my ankles with my hands tied behind my back, and then they cut us down, and I had to fall to the ground head first with our hands behind your back, right? So that was tough. A lot of hard stunts actually in that movie, so I could go on and on. We did one where we were in a nightclub and they had these 2 big giant 6'9" guys, and they each had me, one on this side, one on this side, and I was on a mini trampoline. And I was bouncing on the mini trampoline, 1, 2, 3, and then they threw me against the wall, and I had on full police gear, hit the wall. I hit like a concert speaker, glass was shattering everywhere, hit the ground. And I actually hurt my ribs pretty bad on that one. But yeah, a lot of crazy stunts on that one.
That's crazy. Oh my gosh. So I know that you were talking about your mother's book. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So in 2008, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer. And years before, I remember her traveling back and forth to Tennessee, and she would tell me about our family history and the research that she was doing. But then when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, she gave me her manuscript, and it's about a man named Sherrad Bryant. Sherrad Bryant was my great-grandfather, 7 generations removed, and he was a free man of color during the time of slavery. He sold himself into indentured servitude, and he went on to become one of the wealthiest landowners in the South, pre-Civil War. So it was pretty crazy. So my mom asked me if I would have her book published. I told her that I would. And then after she passed away in 2013, it was the first opportunity that I had to pick up the book, and I read it and I wept like a baby. I was just blown away by this book. So I had the book published, and all the money that I raised from the sale of the book, I give to Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's research. And the name of the book is Bryant Acres. It's an amazing read. And I actually wrote a screenplay based on the book. So I'm speaking to some people about maybe having a feature film made out of it.
Wow, that's so cool. That's incredible that you have that also just to remember your mom by.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's a true story. It's my family legacy. So it's an honor for me to try to carry the torch and try to get this thing to the finish line for her.
Well, it was an honor to meet you and speak to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was Quinn Early, former NFL wide receiver and current Hollywood stuntman. For more interviews with interesting people, please subscribe to my channel.